Hey, Emma.
Yes, Madelyn.
What do I say to you before a podcast when I haven't come up with a joke yet?
I don't know. What do you say?
I'm trying. Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your womanizing wizard host, Madelyn.
I'm your sad robot wife host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's show. This week, we've got both sides of the genre coin here with Trine and Signalis.
Are those both sides of the genre coin?
Of game genres, absolutely.
Okay.
One of them, fantasy. The other one, sci-fi.
You're right. That's the coin. That's the only coin.
The two games.
Yeah.
So, shall we dive? Shall we dive in?
Let's dive in. I'm ready to talk about it.
All right. I'm trying to get started. I'm going to just say trying as trying.
Mel did not say that before the show today because she was trying not to spoil her joke for me, I assume.
I did. I avoided it. I also almost said the word trying in the joke setup, and I had to pivot really fast as I was saying it.
Wow. Skills.
Anyway, speaking of pivoting really fast, Trine is a side-scrolling platformer from Frozen Byte, Finnish developers. Big European developer week here at Talk This.
Sure.
Yeah. Released for Windows originally in 2009 and now ported to most other systems to play. And in Trine, you're in a fantasy world and you can play some local co-op with 3 players if you want to. So that made Trine the pick. I almost got Signalis, but once I saw that Trine was local co-op, I felt I didn't have a choice.
Co-op.
Yeah.
Theoretically, I think that the plot sets up that there shouldn't be co-op, but it's fine.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was reading about the game, I was like, oh, I didn't really pick up that the Trine did that. Because it doesn't when you're playing with 2 players.
Yeah.
So that speaks to the depth of story going on here, I think.
It's very light D&D, the story of Trine.
That's a good way of putting it. It's D&D when everyone has picked a decently strong character for themselves, but then no one is an actor.
Yeah. So I assume a lot of D&D sessions.
Not a lot of, like, big, long, slow combat sessions, though. Which is some of my experience of D&D. There's combat, but it's mostly
You do,
puzzles.
I assume, do a little bit less jumping when you play D&D.
Physically, maybe.
Do you do platforming in D&D?
Wouldn't that be dope if you did?
I think somebody that's a free idea for a game master out there. If you put a platforming section in. If you're sick of combat, platforming.
It's a good idea until all of the players overestimate like their character's dexterity in jumping and they fall to their death. Like it's a good way to just kill the entire party.
Well, I guess you give them a couple of second chances, right?
I guess. You'd have to figure it out. Look, we're not the dungeon masters here.
Yeah,
dungeon masters, you can figure out.
It's the idea, we're not giving you the specifics.
Jumpy D&D is our idea.
Anyway, tell us the light story of Trine.
Yeah. So the light story of Trine. So I appropriately, Click My Boyfriend and I played like the first 3 levels of Trine, of which there appear to maybe be 16 according to the menu, maybe. So we played for a bit. So in Trine, it's like a very typical fantasy world, like Emma said, light D&D scenario. The king died in a fantasy kingdom, and of course, because he doesn't have an heir, the kingdom is in turmoil. I always sort of think that's a little funny, right? Like, if the king is at the place where he's gonna die, and he hasn't got an heir, like, come up with a plan, dude. Like, pick an heir.
He's busy, okay?
You're right. Anyway, the kingdom falls into turmoil, and it's in so much turmoil that the undead decide that it's a good time to invade.
Makes
Which,
sense.
is a danger you take when you don't have a clear succession plan.
Yeah.
Just, write your will. The Astral Academy, which is like the wizard school, right? That's what it sounds like, and that's what it is. It's so dangerous. It's being evacuated, and in that wildness, there's a thief, Zoya the thief, who decides it's a good opportunity to do some looting. And at the same time, the Amadeus the wizard, who is sort of a loser. He's not a very good wizard.
No.
He's much more interested in romancing ladies. And Pontius the knight, who's just there. I don't know. Pontius, I had a less clear picture of why he was there, for honor. But all three of them end up in this magical room, touching a magical object called the Trine at about the same time. And the Trine, apparently, the wizard remembers after he has touched it because he's dumb.
He doesn't know how to do a fireball spell, so...
He does not. So that tells you the quality of wizard you're working with here.
Yeah.
And when I play, he mostly doesn't have the ability to remember how to move things. Oh, man. Let's talk about how long Click Boyfriend and I spent on the first notable puzzle, because we forgot that the wizard could, move things, not just conjure blocks. We were like, what's happening? We're stuck. We can't get through. How is this possible? This is so hard. And then it was oh, the wizard can move the thing to be a battering ram. We don't have to just, run into it awkwardly and have it move slowly into the wall. Anyway, we're really good at games here. Good at puzzles. But the wizard remembers it's the Trine, this object that they've touched, which can bind souls together. And if you're playing single player, what that means, and again, I did not pick this up from the game. They probably said it. But it means that the three of you have to inhabit sort of just one physical body. And that's you can warp between the three of your bodies, but only one of you can have a body at a time, and the other two are just souls floating around inside.
Yes.
And so then puzzling ensues. You got to figure out how to undo that, because that's kind of a rough situation to be in.
Yeah.
And so you travel through the fantasy world, trying to undo it, and saving the kingdom in the process.
Yeah.
So
unless you happen to be playing co-op, and then it's fine.
Yeah, this is one of the... It's weird that there is a group of 3-player co-op games.
What do you mean?
Well, Secret of Mana, too, right? Is a 3-person co-op game. And, not to do... It's the if I had a nickel every time this happened, I'd have a dime, but that's a lot. That's a weird amount.
Yeah.
To have. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. I was oh man, it's weird that there are 3-player co-op games. To be fair, they seem to mostly have thrown co-op into this because, it was easy to.
Yeah.
But when you're playing normally, you can swap between Zoya the thief, who can shoot arrows and do grappling, Amadeus the wizard, who can conjure blocks of various sizes and can also do some telekinesis, and Pontius the knight, who is a knight, so he's got a sword and he's got a shield.
Yeah.
And so you can swap between those characters at will, and only one of them is out at a time. But when you're playing multiplayer with I think it's probably less awkward. I think 2 is probably kind of awkward. Because my boyfriend and I had a perfectly fine time because we're good at communicating with each other. But you do have to do a little bit of communicating of I want to be the wizard now, so you've got to swap to someone else, and then I've got to swap to the wizard sort of situation. Because when you're playing just one player, only one character has to be able to get through. And if you're playing 2 players, you have to be a little more thoughtful about how you get through some of the puzzles. But 2 bodies exist at the same time, or 3 of them if you're playing 3-player, which doesn't really make any sense when you think about the story, but it does make sense when you think about friendship.
Yes. It's fine. It's not... The story is not really the point of Trine.
It is not. It really is not. My boyfriend has complained about that the entire time we've been going through. He's what is this? What is this?
You gotta go do things. You're an adventuring party, and there's some magic stuff going on. What else do you need?
I know. I agree.
jumping around, doing stuff.
That's what it's all about. It's all about, it really is all about jumping around. Trine, though, is the rare Talk This Old game that has a relatively consistent history of sequels through the 2010s.
Yes, sort of.
Right. I mean, didn't seem to be a good time at the studio doing that, to be perfectly fair. But they have released 4 of them since 2009, which is unusual. 3.5 of them, maybe, let's say.
Yes. Yeah. At 9, there's also one called 9 Parchments, which theoretically takes place in the same universe as Trine. Because Trine 4 incorporates some of the characters from 9 Parchments.
Got it.
They're currently working... They're unfortunately, for Frozen Byte, currently working on a massively multiplayer online game, which... Good luck with that in these times.
These guys just seem a little absent-minded professor in all of their interviews. It's funny, it's quaint, it's really quaint. Like, all the way back to the first one, they're like, yeah, we develop in a pretty free-form way where everybody can have opinions because, like, we don't think we could handle doing it any other way.
Hey, they're still around. They're still doing stuff. So,
but even in the interviews about the first one, first of all, it's interesting to me, even the 2009 interviews read as such a time capsule because so many of them are like, they start off with, so how are sales going? Right? Like, did you make the money you wanted to make? Imagine leading off an interview to, like, imagine if the interview is
it is interesting. You don't ask that question very much anymore.
You really don't. Just imagine, I read one interview with the Signalis developers, which was really interesting. But, like, imagine if that interview started with, so how's the money going? Like, you guys, did you sell the amount you wanted? But it was interesting, too, because sometimes those questions go like, oh, yeah, we sold a lot. With Trine, they were like, well, we had 3 predictions, and we think we're hitting the middle one. And it's like,
there you go.
Like, good, but also, what a thing to say. And also,
nowadays you don't ask about sales figures. Square Enix just volunteers that it was a disappointment to you.
You're right. That's the new paradigm. But they also asked in one of these interviews, they were like, what is the game they made before this? Shadow something?
Shadowgrounds.
Is that Shadowgrounds? Right. There's so many Shadow media properties that I couldn't.
Yes, there are.
I couldn't do it.
Not Shadow the Hedgehog.
That was not even one that I was considering. So add another to the mix. Shadowgrounds. They asked them, well, did you learn things from Shadowgrounds? And, like, did that make this easier? And he was like, well, sort of. This was still hard. Some of the things that were hard were still hard. Like, he was like, man, don't be, like, there's too much honesty here. We shouldn't be asking this question. You shouldn't be answering it this way. What is happening? What a weird and different relationship between the interviewers there. But this was among the sort of, like, early side of, like, Steam and PlayStation Network kind of success games.
Yeah. I was reading the IGN review for the original that, like, starts out with, like, oh man, 2D action adventure games aren't in retail anymore, but on the digital distribution platforms, they're alive.
Yes, the digital distribution platforms that are so separate from retail.
I know, I thought that was so funny to, like, distinguish it like that.
Yeah. Well, it was also, they talk a lot in these interviews. They talk over and over in these interviews, which, again, maybe you would have this discussion a little bit today, but I feel like it was framed a little differently in these. They talk over and over again about how, like, 20, whatever your currency is the most that people will pay for a downloadable game in 2009. Yeah. And, well, I think we still are having that conversation about indie titles of a certain size and how much people are willing to pay for them and, you know, $1 an hour, right? That's the that's the benchmark, right? But here they were talking really, like, literally about, like, anything on the PlayStation Network, and it was like, oh man, that's not how it works now.
No. We have more complicated discussions about how much games should be priced now.
Yeah.
Fortunately and unfortunately.
It was quaint. They did have some issues, though, apparently, with it being priced differently on different platforms, which, again, now is like, yeah, sure. Like, yeah, it does cost more. I did buy the the Trine Ultimate Edition that includes Trine 1 through 4 on PlayStation because it was cheaper than just buying Trine Enchanted Edition, the first game, on Switch.
Oh, Nintendo.
It's fine. Whatever. Look, it would be a good game to be able to play handheld if you were playing alone, so I can't fault them for the upcharge there too much anyway. But and also it's on sale right now. To be fair, it's on sale. But it was also interesting how much they talked about, like it's really hurting us that for whatever reason it costs more on Steam than it costs on PlayStation. And it's like, just change it then. And also, who cares? A different time.
Sort of just continuing off of like the way that the developer works. Trine 3 is super fascinating.
So let me introduce to folks first a little more. We've been talking around the game, but in the game, right, you're these 3 characters with different abilities, right? And you're kind of, mostly puzzle platforming through the levels. So you're having to do a lot of like, okay, I'm going to grapple, and then I'm going to conjure a box, right? And if I'm fighting, I have to use the arrows or the sword, and you've got like a magnet shield that you can use sometimes as the soldier, right? So you're just doing a bunch of puzzle solving, and you can do even more puzzle solving if you want to get all the little green experience potions, which of course Cook My Boyfriend and I do, because we can't help ourselves. He already said, he's like, I'm treating these green potions like Super Monkey Ball, which is dangerous. I don't know. We'll see if we keep playing. He's not loving it, but I'm like local co-op, so we will probably keep playing. And so Trine 1 and Trine 2 are both 2D like platformers in this like very similar vein. I think Trine 2 is supposed to be better than Trine 1, from what I've heard. Like an improvement on the formula.
They are they're 3D, but they only move in 2D, right?
Yes, that's true. That's a good distinction. But the movement is 2D. You're right. The graphics, which are lovely, are in that 3D, but you only move in that 2D direction. However, Trine 3 is wild.
Yeah, so apparently, like, in development, they were decided when they were working on Trine 3, which Joel Kinnunen, who's the VP of Rosenbyte, said they started in late 2012. They were like, we're going to do this in full 3D. We're going to have a 3D platformer and combat thing. They haven't done that really before. And it seems like they weren't prepared to do that.
No.
And like they got it very ambitious, he said, and apparently that ambition was beyond what they actually had the capability to do. And he talks really frankly about how much it cost and how much it would have cost. So the issue with Trine 3 is it sort of just ends without ending. It's quite short, and it doesn't actually come to the end of the light story that surrounds it. So it really does feel like they didn't finish it in some ways, or a lot of people perceived it that way when they played it, and there was a lot of backlash towards it.
And to be fair, in a much more, I think, genuine way.
Yes.
Well, there was still definitely the conversation of like, did they do this because they're going to sell us some DLC later? This is not coming in the majority from the toxic gamer, like, this is unfinished, GLC, community, like, genuinely unfinished. Yeah.
But he talks really frankly about how much it cost. It says it cost nearly triple Trine 2, $5.4 million, which, you know, this is an indie game, right? They're a small studio. They're like around 100-ish sort of people, basically. So you might be like, 5.3 million, you know, AAA games. It's not working on the same budget as that.
Yeah.
And he was saying that to put in like their initial like story written, the levels that they had planned, to actually create those things and finish it, it would have tripled the amount of money that they would have to spend. He said probably up to $15 million. And they just hadn't planned it out sufficiently enough to realize that until like they had sunk a lot of time and money into it as it was. And that's sort of what happened. So Trine 4 goes back to, 3D environments and models, but they're on a 2D space, understandably.
It's so interesting, just the amount of frankness, but also the amount of... It just seems like nobody's steering the ship there. The studio. Just over and over again, to different degrees and in different ways in these interviews, they're like, it's chaos, basically.
Yeah.
Which is just so funny. Like, you would not catch me saying that about my workplace. But overall, I mean, I found the game, like, pretty fun. It's definitely, and this is something I've seen can be a little polarizing to people. It's definitely got some, like, floaty jank to it. Right?
Well, it uses a full physics engine.
Yeah.
Is one thing that was noted on it. So if you're thinking about, I always think about like Yakuza physics, right?
Yeah.
It sort of has that working in there so that all objects are sort of impacted by the physics engine. Yeah. So I can see how that will create jank.
But I also appreciate how, sometimes it's like, yes, I'm going to solve the puzzle in a way that it looks like is the way the developer intended. But there's also lots of ways to kind of cheese your way around puzzles sometimes. And it's like, you know what? I appreciate that in a, like, 2009, whatever. It's not 2.5. Like, what do you say when it's a 2D, 3D like this? What do I even call it?
A 2.5D is fine.
A side-scroller, let's say. Side-scrolling, I guess, is what I care about. Like, I like that in my, like, 2009 remastered side-scrolling platformer, right? Like, yes, let's have it feel not super tight at all times, right? Let me accidentally drop a block on myself and have the wizard kind of stutter out for a while until it figures out how to get the block over him. Like, absolutely. So, I would say, I don't know if I can... Well, maybe the game... I'm sure the experience of the game is just so much different as single player. And in many ways seems like it's maybe better. But
yeah, that's what a couple of reviews I read said.
I can't really speak to that. The multiplayer is fun in that it's local co-op multiplayer, and there's not a lot of that. So if you're looking for that, you can definitely pick it up. You can get all 4 right now for like $15 on PlayStation. Yeah, so
there you go. Keep you busy.
It's good. Like, I feel like between this and River City Girls, we've had a good sort of local co-op moment here at Tapas NYC HQ. Really quickly, boyfriend was like, let's get River City Girls 2. Like, right after we finished the first one, I had to be like, let's wait. So this will be good. We can like trade off on those a little bit here. I think it'll be good for us. I think it'll be good.
Very good.
They're supposedly making 5. There was a leak that maybe they're making 5.
We'll see.
If Trine, a Clockwork Conspiracy appears, then this guy who always leaks the PlayStation Plus games, I tip.
Good. Love that.
It's a weird game to still be. This is my last thought. It's a weird game to still have them making.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they seem like they can just sort of do stuff.
Against all odds.
Against all odds.
Like,
and maybe it has to do with being in Europe.
I guess. It's weird that the studio hasn't totally fallen apart based on everything that they say in interviews. It's also weird that this game that feels... Even though the reviews at the time were like, there's not a lot of games that are exactly like this in this like specific local co-op fantasy adventure
There
zone.
Still aren't, to be honest.
I know, but I was going to say it feels very much like an aughts game, even though the reviews are like, it's not. but I play it and I'm like, oh yes, this is a game from a different era. And so it's fascinating to me that it's like they continue to make that game.
Yeah.
Like over and over again. Still. Good for them.
All the Trines feature the same characters, by the way. So
yeah,
they are direct sequels to each other.
Excellent. I can't wait to find out what happens in the story. So that really sells it for me. Well, speaking of games that harken back to a different era and have a story, let's talk about Signalis.
Yeah. We talked about Signalis a little bit a few weeks ago now for Madelyn's retro game aesthetic.
Yep.
Episode. Because it very much is harkening back to the sort of PlayStation-y look of stuff like Silent Hill and Resident Evil from that time period. Also, you might say, 2.5D
yes.
perspective. More of top-down in this one, but...
A little less jumping in this one, I think. Unless, I mean, you tell me.
I don't think... No, you can't... I don't think she jumps.
So,
no.
if you're choosing your 2.5D games this week purely based on jumping, that's the
Trine
decision
has
point.
more.
Trine more jumping.
More jumping.
Overall. Otherwise, pretty similar. No, just kidding. Signalis is a survival horror game, hence the Resident Evil Silent Hill influence, from Rose Engine, which is a 2-person German development studio.
Yep.
This is their first game that came out in October 2022.
They've been working on this game since 2014, so...
I was wondering about that. I was like, man, this feels like it would take 2 people a long time.
Yes. It was the original concept. They released like a playable build a few years ago now that was somewhat different it was a little simpler in gameplay concept, I think. So it definitely expanded, I think, in complexity over the years that they were working on it.
As games are wont to do.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they didn't go 3D, or we would have gotten just a third of Signalis.
There are actually a couple of first-person 3D sections, so...
So you're telling me they intended the whole game to be that, and then they scaled back for budget reasons? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No. I'm joking. So I'm going to leave most of the story explanation to Emma here, who's actually played this. But you're in, like, sci-fi space future, like, sort of, though, because a lot of the technology is not really future, right? With androids. Androids very in games right now, I think. Indie games, at least.
Yeah, so... Without getting too into the lore, because in interpretations of the story and whatever, because if you're really curious about that, oh my god, you can find so many think pieces on YouTube, and you should just go do that. Some of them good, even. But sort of in the background, like Madelyn said, you're sort of in a retro futuristic setting. Sort of combined German, Japanese / Chinese cultural influence space where there's space travel and these robots called replicas that you're in this this planetary system under the nation of Yusan, which broke away from a larger empire, but ended up also sort of becoming more totalitarian and over-controlling and very, like, surveillance state-y with, like, you know, like, re-education camps, and you go to school over the mining facilities and that sort of stuff.
Healthy nation building.
Yeah,
steps.
normal stuff. And replicas are such a huge part of this sort of system. They do a lot of its military and labor force, and sort of even administration stuff. And replicas, as you find out a little bit later, they're sort of they're like robotic bodies, but they're neural patterns are made from like a single copied human brain. So there's different types of replicas, but each type of replica has like a neural pattern that's just like one person that they just copy over and over again into different brains. But what's relevant here is you are an Elster unit. It's a ship technician replica. You're waking up in a crashed ship where you were apparently flying into space with a Gestalt partner, who is what they call just the humans, named Ariane. But she is missing from the ship, so you get a little tutorial where you go through the ship, you learn how to do stuff like combining items, solving light puzzles, interacting and looking at things, right?
But not jumping.
There's no jumping. Until you eventually make your way out of the ship to go look for her. And you find instead a gate in the snow that you pass through, and then a hole in the snow that you go down, and then a hole within the hole that you crawl through, and you find yourself in this strange sort of radio technician room. And in there is a copy of The King in Yellow, which is a... what's his name? It's not Lovecraft, it's the other guy.
Yeah.
The Robert W. Chambers book, or rather the book that's within the Robert W. Chambers book that you open, and then suddenly there's a strange series of numbers and a strange thing starts happening, and then you get the title screen, and then suddenly Elster is in the bathroom of a Lang mining facility called Sierpinski, looking for a woman now called Alina, in a facility that seems to have been taken over by some sort of zombie thing. You find these dead replicas that seems to have something wrong with them, but you're here, you're looking for Alina, so you go down deeper into the facility and have to fight through these strange replicas, figure out sort of what's going on in this facility, and see if you can find the person that you're looking for while you're there. And it gets a little, as you go, it gets a little bit more and more like, this seems like something funky's going on. I sure did play this videotape and then went into the videotape and then picked up an item, but I still have the item don't worry about it. So it sort of continues on functioning on sort of halfway like reality, halfway like dream logic, I guess. Until you figure out what's happening and where your wife is. She's not really your wife, but it's very Silent Hill 2 inspired, so she might as well be your wife.
Sad robo-wife.
Sad robo-wife.
Although I guess you're looking for the human wife.
Yeah, you are the sad, you're the sad robot wife.
So Signalis got really, really good reviews, although there are a couple things about it that were a little polarizing, I think. What were your thoughts on I can't remember who talked about this on the podcast, so forgive me if I'm asking you to repeat yourself. But what were your thoughts on the inventory system?
It was a little annoying, but you get used to it. I see how, like, I just wish that the flashlight didn't take up a space. That's, like, my one thing. If they had 6 inventory slots, but I could just have the flashlight, that would have been nice.
So, as Emma mentioned, in something that is both very much an homage to the Resident Evil games, as well as... I mean, it's a survival horror game, so inventory management is almost always a part of those games, right?
Yes.
And part of the developers talked about this in the interview I read. They were like, if you're feeling comfortable, it's not really a horror game. So you kind of have to have a limit on the inventory, and also no matter how many inventory slots we give people, they fill up the whole thing. So yeah, we had to pick eventually. But you only get 6 inventory slots, and one of the few things that seem to get semi-regular criticism or noted as a frustration point was you have to do, again, very much in the spirit of Resident Evil and Silent Hill, a fair bit of backtracking to be like, okay, I'm putting my key card in the storage and I'm getting some ammo, but then I have to go out and I have to pick another key card, so I have to drop all my ammo. And just a little bit of inventory management in that very PlayStation 1 kind of way that contributes at most places to it feeling tense and like you have limited resources, but every once in a while to a sort of like, annoying kind of moment.
Yeah, for me, the only time I found it, I actually found there's a couple of sections where you don't have a map anymore. And I am so bad at any sort of navigation. So it was less having to backtrack to the safe room and more in those areas like, crap, where's the safe room?
Yeah.
Where is it? But it's sort of broken up into sort of sections as you go further down into these facilities. So you're always within like a discrete area until you solve like the final puzzle that lets you go through to the next area.
Mm-hmm.
And those areas aren't that big. And they usually have at least 2 safe rooms, if not more, where you can switch out your items. And it always gives you, before there's like a big combat encounter,
right,
they're like, here's your safe room.
Yeah.
Where you can put your stuff. So there's that as well. So I didn't really find that part that annoying. And the map thing is just a me problem, to be honest. So
I did see, though, I mean, I feel like this is something that is becoming, I don't know, trendy, maybe? Something. I did see a couple of reviewers mention, like, I had a notebook, and I enjoyed having a notebook with this. Which, of course, is a little bit of a flashpoint around Elden Ring, right? But yeah. I feel like it is becoming something that is maybe a slightly emerging trend in games, this idea of games where it's you need to be taking your own notes. Which is something. Is interesting.
Yeah, I didn't. It does technically have a in-game screenshot taker that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did just sketch little pictures on like the 2 puzzles that I needed to use that for.
Yeah.
Rather because it took up space in my inventory. I was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
That's where my flashlight goes.
I'll use my real life inventory. Thank you.
Yeah. But there are only like I said, there's only like 2 puzzles where I needed to draw something.
Do you think that's because you're smart? You're like a very smart person?
Maybe. I mean, I'm sure that if you were trying to follow like the lore of the game, maybe for some people taking notes would be helpful to hold that in your head. I felt like I got the vibes. And when I'm like, I got the vibes.
Yeah.
You know, like that worked. That's all I need.
Yeah. Which is good. This game runs on a lot of vibes. I mean, I know there's a lot of lore in there, but like even I feel like if you go through all the lore, it still runs on a lot of vibes.
It does run on a lot of vibes. Complimentary.
I did see a fair number of pieces though that were also quite complimentary of the idea that, you know, there are a fair number of puzzles, or you tell me, but there seem to be a fair number of puzzles that are like, I have to find the code for this, right?
Yeah.
Or I have to find the key card for this, or whatever. And most games have conditioned us to be like, ah, yes, the code is probably on the desk, right by the door, or I can find it in 5 seconds. And Signalis goes a little bit further to emulate realistic behavior of, you know, that's not really how people store their passwords.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes we're done with our passwords. But the puzzles around those, like, very stereotypical, like, obligatory game puzzle required more effort and more actual puzzling than it sometimes does.
Yeah. To be fair, the first puzzle I think is the one they wrote about that's like, it's the safe is stuck on the default combination.
Yeah.
And then you have to go find the manual to get the default combination, which makes sense.
Yeah.
They wouldn't just write it out on the service thing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, once you get further into, like, the dream logic stuff, it's like, people... Adler, why did you store your stuff like this? Why does your lock have to be the planetary system at a certain point? Why did you do this, sir?
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
And the lock is, of course, you know, stored within another copy of the King in Yellow, as you do. You
of
know?
course. You gotta have,
like
you gotta
normal
have copies
people
of your
do.
book everywhere. Super normal thing to do. Normal people, normal robot people behavior.
Yeah. Seems normal.
So I won't talk about the actual endings of Signalis, partially because this did not feel like a game that I could follow well from the Wikipedia summary, which is a complimentary, right? But it was interesting to me that your ending is not, in most games it's determined by like you found this item or you made this like these kinds of story choices, right? That sort of thing. And in Signalis, it's determined much more by your play style. Like, maybe you could speak a little bit more to this than I can, but it seemed to be like, how fast did you move through things? And like, how much were you healing yourself? And how much ammo did you use? And that kind of thing.
Yeah. The advice for getting these endings that, like, the popular advice I've seen is also, like, it's not it's not really clear, to be honest. Like, it seems like some of it is like do it fast, some of it is whatever, but like I didn't play it fast, and I apparently got the one that you have to play fast to get, so it's the advice for getting it seems to be like not. You can also, if you want to get all endings on a single playthrough, you can go into the debug menu and command it to do that, and they'll give you like a little spooky message for doing so. So
yeah,
there you go. But yeah, it's basically just like how much do you get, like, do you heal yourself a lot? Do you wander around being hurt a lot? Do you spend a lot of time in like the first person sections of the game? Like far more time than you need to. Like how long did it take you to play it? How many enemies do you kill versus just run away from? That sort of stuff impacts like what the ending is. With the exception of the secret ending, which is you do have to find some items, which were found by just in random places in the game. You can tune your radio to a certain frequency, and then if you put that frequency through I forget what they're called, but you put the audio in and it prints out a picture. Mm-hmm. So you put the audio in, it prints out a picture that indicates a place within the game, sometimes after where you've gotten, like, you've already past that point when you get the signal. So it's like you have to do it on a repeat playthrough. So you find it in different places, these different keys, and there's a safe at the very end where you put in the keys and then you put in the password, which is a very long series of numbers that you probably have seen multiple times throughout the game. And then you get the ending, so you skip the final boss fight, essentially.
Which is interesting to me that they seem to have nodded to the need for the replay value after all, because in talking about this in this interview with Waypoint, they're like, well, the point of these different endings was not really to have people collect them all, right? We did it this way kind of intentionally to create something personal for the player based on how they played, and not to have like a good ending, bad ending paradigm. Yeah. But it's interesting that then it's like, but actually there's a best ending.
Well, that's not even true, to be honest.
Sorry, I don't mean it exactly like that, but it's like, but in the end, there's also like the like special ending that like you would normally chase in a game.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess so. There's nothing in the game that would indicate to you that well, I mean, the safe is there, but people found these radio stations totally randomly. Mm-hmm. So it's less there to be like, yeah, you should definitely replay it, and more there because they put it in there, right? For one thing, because they have been working on this thing for ages, and it's probably their little baby or whatever. Yeah. And just to appease, like, there's some people that play games and they take it all in, so you appease those people as well.
Yeah.
I saw an interview where the developer was like, I doubt most people will finish this, which is true. This is a very big reality of games.
Yep.
Signalis does also have a fake out ending in the middle that can trick a lot of people into thinking like there's nothing else afterwards. And they didn't seem like they were terribly bothered if people do just leave it there, right? Which I think is a healthy attitude to have. If you're playing with stuff like that, if you're like, I'm putting like a fake ending, I'm putting like secret stuff, I'm gonna make this really vibey and whatever, it's a good healthy attitude to be like, so, some people just, they won't be interested in it anymore. And I think that's good to think that,
Thanks, Nier Automata, though.
I guess so. That is the other thing about Signalis that I've seen some criticism of, although I would argue that this is, like, essential to its themes in a lot of ways. Like, you can quibble about specifics if you want, but I think that it employs a lot of very overt references to other media. Like I said, it opens with The King in Yellow, which is, what are those things called? Cosmic horror?
That seems right, yeah.
Sort of story. There's some Lovecraft quotes in there also. There are these paintings, most prominently like the Isle of the Dead, these paintings that the painter painted them multiple times over the course of their career, so there's multiple versions of them. Very overt references to Evangelion and Ghost in the Shell with various animation sequences, aesthetics of stuff like Blame and Gantz, lots of probably Silent Hill 2, obviously, Resident Evil, obviously, the Shining carpet is there.
Yeah.
It's full of references and homages and redos. And I think some people think that sort of weakens it in ways that it's so overt about that and so unashamed of being referential, I guess. But also, like, without getting into, like, what it means, one clear theme of the game is the way, like, the problems with repeating, like, what happens when you repeat things, copying things over and over, being based on something else and, like, changing past that, is very much, like, central to what's happening in Signalis. So the fact that the game itself is so, like, we've taken old things and built off of them and shifted their meaning and made them a little weird and, like, move them sideways or whatever, is very key to, like, driving home part of the point of the game. So, well, I think you could be like, oh, but this one's too obvious or whatever, and that's fine. I do think that the use of references in general is, like, a very essential part of Signalis' unique identity, which is a weird thing to say, but...
When did the Leonardo DiCaprio meme become primarily derogatory? I feel like that shift happened very recently.
Did it? I don't know. I see it used both ways still, so.
I know, but I feel like I've started to see it used, like, more often in a, like, I'm making fun of people doing this way.
Well, I mean, I think that as a culture, maybe we're more sensitive about, we've grown more and more sensitive about plagiarism. In both good and bad ways, I'd guess. Good because, you don't want independent artists being stolen from. Bad because sometimes people are like, oh, corporations, I must jump in front of the bullet for this big corporation.
Speaking of memes. Yeah.
So maybe that's it a little bit of, like, being like, I recognize that as, like, you don't have any originality, you're just stolen this from something else, maybe a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stealing things, time to
let's do it.
Mash up Good luck to us. Good luck to us.
That's all we do is we reference stuff in our little mashups, don't we?
I don't know how we do this one, Emma. They're too different. I whine when they're too similar. I whine when they're too different. There's like no usually though it's like I can be like, okay, they're both this. This one it's like
the really cursed answer that I don't actually mean this, but it's funny is like it's just braid.
Yeah. Sure.
Do you know braid, don't you?
I know braid. I'm just saying sure, that is cursed. You're right.
Thank you. But I don't want to do that.
Put that aside. Okay. As usual, let me boil it down to the core elements here, right? Trine, that like 3-person thing. I won't insist on co-op. I don't actually think the co-op is core to Trine. I mean, I wish it was, but it's not. So I feel like having 3 characters is probably an important part of a successful mashed game here.
There's something there with like the they're inhabiting the same body.
Yes, like a body horror kind of.
Yeah, like
thing.
You take the concept of the Trine of only one of you can exist physically at a time. And make it
awful.
And take it to its, like, logical extreme of it would suck so bad.
Yeah. Okay, I can see that, right? And we probably have to, I feel like we have to go in a little bit more of the sci-fi direction with this, right? I think it's gotta feel like more like it's 3 consciousnesses that have been put into the same android body, maybe. This is, of course, Full Metal Alchemist, but that's okay. That's okay. Like, we can do that. It can be greed.
That's fine.
Like, anime influence is very much in the DNA of this, so that's fine.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so, like, 3 consciousnesses in the same robot. Gotta decide if there's jumping or no jumping. That's the real decision point here.
I think there should be jumping.
Okay, jumping.
Should be able to jump.
Cool. Are we leaning more platformer direction or more Resident Evil?
Well, if there's jumping, I guess it's got to go more platforming direction. I don't think Resident Evil has any jumping.
It could, though.
You're right, that could revolutionize it. Add jumping to Resident Evil. No purpose to it. Just let them jump, you know?
Do you think the horror would land, though, if it's like a 2D, side-scrolling platformer?
I mean, sure, maybe it could. Signalis is not, like,
I know it's not jump scary.
Scary. I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but it's not like, sort of more disturbing.
Yeah. But see, I feel like I don't, like, there's gotta be some of the, like, I guess they're both puzzle solving, so you just incorporate some more complicated puzzles that involve a little more backtracking, maybe, to the...
We could do a couple of, like, perspective shifts. That's part of Signalis' thing. So if we wanted to have sections where you have more 3D freedom of movement, but most of it's 2D, that could work, maybe?
That could work. I see that. I feel like the core concept, if we're really going to emulate this, it would just be like, well, okay, that's good enough. Let's get started. And we'll see if there's enough money to finish it.
Yeah. Seems like it works to me.
Like, pretty good core idea there. Love the idea of the sci-fi horror. They're all in one body. That's scary.
Yeah.
And probably the endings would have to be something like, okay, the endings have to be like, okay, there's 3 endings where each one of them ends up in control of the android. Or there's an ending that's like, collectivist sort of thing, where they all, like, ultimately decide to that they are better coexisting.
Maybe.
That's not really something that is in either of the games, but does feel like it's something that's in a lot of these Android indie games. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of as a Kingdom Hearts girl.
Oh no.
There's a lot of intrinsic horror to like being one but also separating but also combining. Like both those things are sort of scary in their own way,
Yeah.
So I think that'll be neat.
I hate the logical conclusion of that though, that we've created just like Sora the game.
Kingdom Hearts did fundamentally shape like my taste in media. There's some Kingdom Hearts flavor in Signalis. That's all I'm saying.
I also like the idea that you've presented the girl of the king like a horse girl, but like a Kingdom Hearts girl. You know what I mean?
Me? Yeah, you're right. That's me? I'm the horse Kingdom Hearts girl?
Yes. I mean, you are, but also just as a general genre of girl.
I think it's true, though.
Yeah, you said as a Kingdom Hearts girl, like capital G girl, alongside it.
I think that's a genre of person.
I agree. I just hadn't thought of it before. So, the modders can create skins where the 3 characters are various Kingdom Hearts characters.
There you go.
So that works out. So, listeners, if you were trapped with 2 other people having to share one body with different skills to solve puzzles, who would you choose to be your other 2? That's a pretty good question. I wish I had asked that on the actual show, but I don't have time to think about it now. If you were in a scary sci-fi future, would you want to be an android or a human master of those androids? Or if you have any other thoughts about the episode and what we talked about this time, hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, where Emma's about to pull our next 2 games, and read our blog featuring long-running series Click My Boyfriend, and Split Screen. But perhaps most importantly, if you enjoyed today's show, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, really wherever you can find podcasts, wherever you found the podcast today. Subscribe to Talk This so you never miss an episode. Next week, it's our PAX edition. Emma, we had a great time at PAX, didn't we?
Yeah.
Unless anything happened at PAX. Unless PAX was lame this year, and everyone agrees that PAX was lame this year, in which case we had an okay time at PAX.
We sure did.
One of those things is true, but you'll find out next week in our PAX episode. And then in a week after that, it's our 7 weeks in gaming show.
I apologize in advance for...
So
the 7-week
strap
mess.
in for the marathon. I'll be brief in my thoughts. We can also in that, talk about The Last of Us, the TV show, too.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
But in 3 weeks, what's on deck, Emma?
For our old game, I did replace the hat, by the way.
I was going to ask. I was like, there's only a game and a half in the hat now. So,
for our old game, we'll be talking about Legacy of Kain.
Okay.
And for
Biblical.
our new game... What?
Biblical, I said.
For our new game, we'll be talking about Tchaya, which I'll make sure I'm pronouncing that right by the time we talk about it.
I did not even... You said it, and I thought you'd stuttered. So.
Tchaya, maybe.
We'll know how to pronounce it in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We have 3 whole weeks to learn the correct
I will double
pronunciation.
check it, don't worry.
Well, listeners, thanks for tuning in. Listener, you're kind of the third person in the Trine thing here as you listen to the podcast here. Did you think about that? I guess that's my sign off. Think about that this week.